We've got lives, and I've got children, and the effort, and we always thank Paul to this day. From 1960, when I left the factory, this is what I've done.
Ringo Starr, the legendary drummer of the Beatles, remains a symbol of peace, love, and timeless rock and roll. But despite the band's enduring global fame, Ringo has a surprising concern about the future. Could it be possible that the legacy of the Beatles, one of the most iconic bands in history, is at risk of fading away? Through changing musical trends, evolving listener habits, and the challenges of staying relevant to younger generations, at 84 years old, Ringo Starr believes the Beatles' cultural impact might be in danger. While the Beatles continue to be celebrated as one of the greatest bands of all time, Ringo Starr has expressed concern about how quickly trends in music and culture move today. In an era where attention spans are shorter, streaming platforms dominate, and viral hits often overshadow full albums, the way people consume music has drastically changed since the Beatles' heyday. One of the challenges Ringo sees is the fading recognition of the Beatles as a transformative force in music. Younger listeners, accustomed to modern production styles and digital platforms, may not connect with the analog sound and slower pacing of their catalog. The focus on singles over albums, amplified by platforms like Spotify and TikTok, contrasts sharply with how the Beatles created their music as complete, cohesive works meant to be experienced in full. Ringo has acknowledged that keeping the band's influence intact requires more than just nostalgic retellings. He sees a need to innovate in how the band's legacy is presented. Commenting in a Rolling Stone interview, he remarked, "You have to meet new generations where they are. Being stuck in the old ways doesn't work anymore." Moreover, ongoing debates about their historical relevance have emerged among younger audiences. Online, some criticize the band as being overrated or unrelatable to today's world. Although these critiques remain a minority, they contribute to fears about how the band's reputation might evolve over time unless active efforts are made to highlight their continued relevance. Ringo's worries are not entirely unfounded. After all, the Beatles existed in an era with no social media, no streaming, and a vastly different music industry landscape. Unless their music continues to be modernized for today's platforms or integrated into current cultural conversations, the band's monumental contributions risk becoming less accessible or appreciated by future generations. Despite the challenges posed by the rapidly evolving music landscape, active steps are being taken to ensure the Beatles remain a vital part of musical and cultural history. Ringo Starr himself has been at the forefront of many of these efforts, alongside Paul McCartney, using modern platforms and collaborations to keep their music relevant. One of the most significant moves in recent years has been the release of new documentaries and restored recordings that give an intimate look into the Beatles' creative process. The 2021 documentary, The Beatles Get Back, directed by Peter Jackson, was a revelation for fans old and new. By showcasing never-before-seen studio footage and shedding light on their collaborative dynamic, the series introduced a renewed appreciation for the band's genius. According to Ringo, the project was an opportunity to dispel long-held myths about the Beatles' fractured final years. In an interview with USA Today, he commented, "People always focus on the negativity in the end. But this showed the joy, the laughter, and the love we had making music together." Aside from retrospectives, both Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr have embraced live performances as a way to connect with fans across generations. Ringo's all-star band tours, which began in 1989, continue to draw massive crowds and bring together legendary musicians to perform both Beatles classics and their own hits. These concerts serve not only as a celebration of the music, but also as a bridge between eras, introducing Beatles songs to younger audiences through live experiences. Additionally, the Beatles' catalog has been digitally remastered and re-released across streaming platforms to adapt to modern listening preferences. The remastered editions of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Abbey Road brought a new level of clarity to the recordings, ensuring they could compete sonically with today's music. These releases have been accompanied by innovative marketing campaigns, such as interactive content on social media and limited edition vinyl pressings, to target both nostalgic older listeners and curious younger fans. Paul McCartney has also collaborated with contemporary artists like Kanye West and Rihanna, merging musical worlds in a way that subtly keeps the Beatles' influence alive. Though Ringo has pursued a more classic rock approach in his own career, he agrees with the strategy of engaging with the modern music scene to remain relevant. Despite these efforts, Ringo has been candid about their limitations. In interviews, he's acknowledged that nostalgia alone isn't enough to secure the band's place in the future. He stated, "We're proud of everything we did, but we can't just rely on the past. You've got to keep moving forward to stay alive in people's minds." The Beatles' collective commitment to modernization demonstrates that staying relevant in an ever-changing world requires both innovation and intentionality. However, it's an uphill battle, and whether their lasting legacy resonates with future generations remains to be seen. Despite their ongoing efforts to remain relevant, Ringo Starr has acknowledged that the Beatles' legacy faces real threats in today's fast-paced and fleeting cultural landscape. One of the biggest risks lies in the rapidly changing behavior of music audiences. Younger listeners are consuming music differently than ever before, often favoring short, viral tracks on platforms like TikTok over the deep dive into full albums that the Beatles helped perfect as an art form. Ringo has also pointed out how the rise in music accessibility, a double-edged sword, has created an overwhelming abundance of content to compete with. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he noted, "There's so much music out there now. You hope somebody stumbles upon the Beatles, but it's harder with so much noise around." This abundance risks burying even monumental achievements under the sheer volume of constant information. Another challenge is how historical context might be lost over time. The Beatles thrived in a world where their innovations in songwriting, recording techniques, and cultural impact were groundbreaking. But as modern technological advancements make it easier to produce elaborate music, the revolutionary aspects of albums like Revolver or Sgt. Pepper's may not resonate as strongly with listeners who lack an understanding of their historical significance. Additionally, shifting cultural narratives may also pose risks. As societal values evolve, there has been increasing scrutiny over the Beatles' behavior and messages seen through a critical modern lens. While such discussions are important, they can sometimes overshadow the band's broader artistic merit. Ringo has referenced this indirectly by emphasizing unity and positivity, stating, "Our music was always about love, and that's something we hope people hold on to, no matter what." The decentralized nature of modern fandom also complicates the passing down of the Beatles' legacy. Unlike previous generations where parents and older siblings passed along records or concert experiences, digital platforms often create individualized music bubbles. Without intentional introduction, younger generations may miss out on the Beatles altogether. Ringo's concerns highlight the delicate balance between reinventing a legacy for modern audiences while preserving its original essence. The risks aren't just about fading into obscurity, they're about losing what made the band truly unique in an ever-shifting cultural and musical landscape. At 84, Ringo Starr isn't content to sit back and let the Beatles' legacy coast on past achievements. Instead, he continues to advocate for ways to ensure the band remains culturally relevant for generations to come. His approach emphasizes authenticity, connection, and adapting to new platforms without losing sight of the band's core messages. A key part of Ringo's vision involves actively engaging with new audiences in ways that resonate with today's media landscape. He has spoken about the importance of evolving alongside technology and culture, saying in a 2019 interview with Billboard, "You've got to meet people where they are." This philosophy explains his openness to multimedia projects like documentaries, streaming collections, and even animations like the revamped Yellow Submarine being introduced to younger viewers. Ringo has also encouraged using education as a vehicle to preserve the Beatles' story. Programs and projects that teach students about music history, including the Beatles' revolutionary influence, have become more common, from university courses to grassroots initiatives. These efforts directly connect the band's achievements with cultural and musicological significance, ensuring their work remains contextualized in history. Another component of his vision centers around pushing the message the Beatles embedded in their music: love and unity. Ringo has repeatedly emphasized, both on stage and in interviews, that their songs were more than just lyrics. They were statements on society. In 2020, he told The Guardian, "Our message is simple: peace and love. It's universal and it doesn't age. That's what I focus on whenever I perform." This mantra reinforces the timeliness of their music's themes, even as cultural norms evolve. In addition to his personal platforms, Ringo sees collaboration as a continuing path forward. The involvement of artists like Kanye West with Paul McCartney and ongoing projects between the Beatles' families, such as Donny Harrison's contributions to archival works, reinforce that partnerships can both protect and modernize the band's music. Ringo's belief is that future collaborations, both in music and multimedia, can help preserve the essence of the Beatles while introducing their sound to new, global audiences. Ultimately, Ringo Starr's message isn't about clinging to nostalgia, but about embracing evolution. While he admits there are no guarantees about how future generations will perceive the Beatles, Ringo consistently emphasizes one enduring hope: that their music continues to bring people together just as it always has. As much as Ringo Starr remains optimistic about preserving the Beatles' influence, he also recognizes the unpredictability of how cultural legacies evolve over time. One of the realities he has openly addressed is that no band or artist, no matter how legendary, is immune to being reinterpreted or forgotten by future generations. Ringo has acknowledged that while he and Paul McCartney continue to promote the Beatles' history, there will eventually come a time when there's no direct representative left to tell their story. This raises the question of how well their legacy will endure without their voices. As he said in an interview with the Irish Times, "We keep it alive while we're here, but after that, it's really up to the fans." This highlights the delicate balance between an artist's personal impact and how their work is maintained independently of them. Another challenge stems from the naturally changing tastes and values of society. What resonated powerfully in the 1960s doesn't always align with the sensibilities of modern audiences. The risk, as Ringo sees it, is that younger generations might view the Beatles as just another old band, rather than the revolutionary figures they were. This is particularly true in discussions about lyrical content and cultural messages, which sometimes don't match today's expectations, or conversations around social progress. The broader issue of legacy management is also a concern. While historical figures like Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra remain recognizable, their influence has notably ebbed in comparison to their heyday. Ringo seemingly wonders whether the Beatles could face a similar fate, despite their unprecedented global success. The music industry's increasingly fast-paced cycle of trends may make it more challenging to maintain their presence in cultural conversations long-term. However, Ringo has also admitted that much of this is beyond control. "We just did the best music we could, and the rest is out of our hands," he once told The Guardian. He believes that while their songs have timeless qualities, it will ultimately be up to future generations and dedicated fans to carry their work forward. The uncertainty surrounding the Beatles' cultural permanence underscores the fragility of even the most iconic artistic legacies. No matter how indelible their place in history may feel today, Ringo Starr's concerns serve as a reminder that every legacy, no matter how monumental, requires continued effort, fresh engagement, and, above all, the will of the audience to keep it alive. As Ringo Starr reflects on the state of the Beatles' legacy, it's clear that he sees its preservation as a shared responsibility. While much has been done to immortalize their music through remastered releases, documentaries, and live performances, Ringo believes the next step lies with fans and future generations. He has often stressed that the Beatles' music isn't meant to just sit in history. It needs to be actively shared and celebrated to stay alive. In recent comments to Variety, Ringo highlighted the importance of storytelling in keeping the Beatles relevant. "If people stop talking about us, it might fade away. But as long as the stories are there, the music will always have a chance to live on." This underscores the role of fans, educators, and even fellow musicians in passing the band's history forward, ensuring that the Beatles remain more than just a footnote in music history. One of the ideas he's consistently pushed is accessibility, making sure the Beatles' music is not only widely available, but also approachable to younger listeners, who may not inherently feel a connection to music created decades before they were born. Streaming platforms have made this easier, but Ringo hopes it doesn't stop there. Engaging with the Beatles' story in a way that resonates with people today, he has hinted, is just as important as hearing the music itself. Ringo has also suggested that the core themes of the Beatles' work, love, unity, and creativity, are what will make their music last if they're embraced and recontextualized in meaningful ways. "We were always about coming together," he shared in a BBC interview. That doesn't really change, no matter when you're listening. Ultimately, Ringo's vision goes beyond admiration for what the Beatles accomplished during their time. It's about encouraging new generations to find their own connection to the music, adapt its messages to the present day, and keep the conversation alive. This call to action isn't directed solely at fans, but at anyone with an appreciation for transformative art. The Beatles may have changed the world during their career, but as Ringo has made clear, it's what the world does with their legacy now that will determine how long that change will be remembered.